Welcome back to Zodiac Talks Tarot, the channel where astrology stops pretending to be background noise and starts speaking in complete sentences you can actually use. I'm your longtime researcher with one foot in the star maps, one in behavioral psychology, and a pocket full of novelist curiosity and Buddhist common sense, and today we are diving into Sagittarius and a simple, inconvenient truth about the rest of 2025. Destiny is not optional, it is a contract you keep with the strongest part of yourself. When the sky talks to Sagittarius, it does not whisper, it tosses you thunderbolts wrapped in philosophy, and this is the year you stop ducking, because the pattern is visible now even if you would rather call it coincidence. The theme is simplicity, which sounds easy until you try it. Because you are gifted at turning a straight line into a seminar, you diagnose, hypothesize, overthink, and then call it freedom when it is really paralysis with a travel budget. The universe is not grading complexity anymore, it is grading clarity, and the Wheel of Fortune appears as your own reflection asking a clean question: do you turn forward with intention, or do you clutch the railing and narrate another déjà vu as if repetition were destiny? The wheel is not a golden elevator, it is a mirror, and mirrors do not lie, they only show you the costume you have been wearing and the posture you have been avoiding. If your definition of success still sounds like your family's brochure, your last manager's performance review, or your ex's complaint about your need for space, the wheel will politely slide that script back across the table and suggest that you read your own handwriting. Here is where psychology and practice meet the chart. Human beings avoid decisions not because they lack information but because decisions end fantasy, and fantasy is metabolically cheaper than change. Neptune retrograde in Pisces exposes that difference with surgical lighting. The dreamy plan that drains you is not vision, it is avoidance with sparkle, while the quiet plan that excites you and reduces friction is the authentic signal. Use a simple test for the rest of the year. If a goal requires you to become a person who never rests, who cannot be honest, or who needs 12 new apps to stay afloat, it is fantasy. If a goal asks you to tell the truth, prune one habit, and take one courageous action this week, it is real. Sagittarius does not lack courage. Sagittarius occasionally misplaces it under a stack of options. So treat options like clothes on a chair and put most of them back in the closet. When fear shows up, remember the old symbol around the wheel, the serpent at the threshold. In myth, the serpent is not an enemy but a doorman. It asks for presence, not perfection. Name the small fear and pay it in action. Send the email, pitch the idea, decline the role you have outgrown. Ask the question that scares you because it would end the ambiguity that has been eating your sleep. The Tower is not a punishment, it is a demolition permit for structures you no longer live in, and the Eight of Cups is not a breakup with life, it is a graduation from a chapter that cannot teach you anything new. In Buddhist language, this is non-attachment in motion, not coldness but clarity, a refusal to worship forms that once held meaning but now only hold delay. Commitment is the hidden curriculum here, and commitment is not the enemy of freedom, it is how freedom chooses a direction. Think of the hermit as the part of you that climbed the mountain for the view and now has to come down and build the path so other parts of your life can follow. There will be moments that feel like solitude, and they are not punishments either. Solitude is the gym where attention stops skipping leg day. Let the Queen of Cups be your coach in that room. Because emotional intelligence is not a mood, it is maintenance, sleep, hydration, boundaries, the three horsemen of grown-up magic. Adopt one brutal clarity rule from the Ace of Swords and watch your anxiety lose funding. Choose a focus and fear, when examined through both psychology and astrology, is rarely the monster it pretends to be. In the symbolic vocabulary of the tarot, the snake coiled around the Wheel of Fortune is not an agent of doom but a gatekeeper. It guards transition, not safety, and asks a single question every time we approach change: do you want to evolve or stay familiar? Most people freeze at that door because evolution never feels like comfort, it feels like exposure. Yet every worthwhile dream, love, creativity, authenticity requires a toll payment in vulnerability. You can't build intimacy without risking misunderstanding, can't begin again without admitting something has ended, and can't speak truth without accepting that someone will mishear you. The Tower, the Eight of Cups, and the Nine of Swords are not horror cards, they are blueprints for dismantling self-sabotage. The Tower doesn't burn your life down, it burns the illusions that kept you bored. The Eight of Cups doesn't abandon joy, it abandons the routines that no longer feed you. The Nine of Swords is the mind's nightly rerun of worst-case scenarios that never make it past the pilot episode. The mature Sagittarius cancels that series and develops a better plot. Modern psychology calls this exposure therapy, Buddhist teaching calls it facing the root of attachment, and common sense calls it finally growing up. The truth is that every fear shrinks to scale once you turn toward it. Avoidance makes shadows taller, action restores light. You learn, as every Sagittarian must, that courage is not the absence of trembling but the refusal to pause because of it. That brings us to the second discipline, walking away without drama. Sagittarius has spent years carrying the don't settle flag like a marathoner who forgot the race ended 3 blocks ago. The universe isn't denying you abundance, it's trying to retire your martyrdom. There's a difference between perseverance and self-punishment, though you've blurred that line with impressive stamina. Accepting emotional leftovers from people too busy to reciprocate, calling exhaustion loyalty, or renaming stagnation patience, these are the psychological gymnastics that keep bright souls dim. The Eight of Cups reappears as your promotion notice. It isn't exile, it's advancement. Every departure from what no longer serves you is a form of spiritual graduation, and discernment becomes your major for the rest of 2025. You are learning when to stop watering dead plants, a metaphor any therapist or gardener could endorse. Mercury's retrograde will tempt you to reopen old case files. Expect familiar faces or memories offering you what sounds like closure but smells faintly of déjà vu. Read the fine print this time. Manipulation often comes dressed as reconciliation, and chaos has learned to market itself as passion. Your evolved self will laugh gently at both and choose silence over repetition. Psychologically, this is the shift from compulsion to consciousness, the moment you realize that curiosity about the past is not the same as invitation. In Buddhist language, this season represents the art of right effort, doing less of what drains and more of what clarifies. Sagittarius is a sign that equates movement with progress, yet wisdom often hides in restraint. To walk away gracefully is to understand that departure is not failure but timing. The archer's power lies in knowing when to release the arrow, not in holding the bow indefinitely. Some exits require no apology, they are maintenance of dignity. By the time the year closes, you'll notice that your definition of bravery has changed. It used to mean confronting external obstacles, people, jobs, expectations. Now it means facing the subtler enemy, your own hesitation. You will find humor in how small the monsters look once the lights are on. You'll tell friends, half joking but fully aware, that fear was just your imagination asking for adult supervision. And you'll understand that the universe was never testing you, it was training you to travel lighter. The act of walking away decisively, kindly, without dragging the past for validation becomes your signature move. That quiet confidence, not the loud fight, will define the rest of your decade. Freedom, for Sagittarius, has always been a tricky word. You've worn it like a badge, defended it like a territory, and confused it more than once with escape. But 2025 isn't buying that old narrative anymore. What's been hidden from you all along isn't destiny, it's commitment. Destiny you've always had, commitment is the discipline that turns vision into substance. You've mistaken detachment for liberation, when in truth, freedom without direction is just spiritual driftwood floating, interesting, but ultimately at the mercy of every tide. The great paradox of Sagittarius is that you crave meaning but resist anchors, forgetting that purpose is the anchor that lets your sail catch real wind. The Death card enters your reading not as a grim omen but as a contract renewal for your evolution. It says, stop dragging half-finished stories behind you. Transformation demands closure, not commentary. When you walk away, the universe wants you to mean it. Don't keep one emotional suitcase unpacked just in case nostalgia calls. Stop revisiting rooms where the lights have been turned off. That is not loyalty, that is self-interruption. Then comes the Queen of Cups, twice a cosmic reminder that emotional intelligence is not just empathy for others but empathy for yourself. You've been everyone's unpaid therapist, the friend who remembers birthdays, forgives lateness, and cheers from the sidelines even when no one notices you're bleeding through your own jersey. It's noble but exhausting. The Queen of Cups says self-care isn't self-absorption, it's preventive maintenance. You cannot pour wisdom from a cracked vessel. The Ace of Swords slices through this sentimentality with surgical precision. It offers clarity through focus. Choose one mission, one purpose, one truth. Do it with the conviction of a monk who somehow has excellent Wi-Fi and no distractions. Multitasking is the polite word for self-delusion. The mind that tries to live 12 lives ends up skipping the best parts of one. Now the Hermit steps forward not as punishment, but as training. The world may misread your solitude as withdrawal, yet it's the opposite. You're not running from noise, you're tuning your frequency. After years of guiding others up their mountains, you're finally climbing your own. The air gets thin up here, conversations fade, your phone may stop ringing but that's the price of altitude. Don't mistake silence for abandonment. Presence becomes more internal, more deliberate. In psychology, this is individuation. In Buddhism, it's stillness. In practical human language, it's learning to enjoy your own company without needing a performance review from the crowd. This year, many Sagittarians will experience a strange form of loneliness that only success can bring. You'll look around and realize that the people who understood your old self don't necessarily understand your new priorities. Some may accuse you of changing as if that were a crime. The truth is, you are changing, and that's the point. Growth and comfort never shared the same address. To evolve, you have to leave familiar neighborhoods of thought and habit. The Hermit holds a lantern not to make others follow but to see the path clearly for himself. His light doesn't flicker with approval ratings. He doesn't need applause, he needs accuracy. Eventually, you'll find that peace is louder than praise, and solitude, once feared, becomes a luxury you earned. Repetition, in tarot and in life, is the universe's way of clearing its throat. When you keep seeing the same symbols, the Death card, the Hermit, the Queen of Cups, it isn't coincidence, it's curriculum. The divine syllabus says, I meant what I said. Transformation is not elective. The Hermit insists that wisdom grows in silence, not in social media debates. The Queen of Cups repeats that emotion is not weakness but radar, it tells you what's real long before reason does. The repetition isn't punishment, it's emphasis. Life is trying to underline something you keep skimming over: commitment, stillness, self-respect. And then the Ten of Swords drops like the final period at the end of a decade-long sentence. It's the card of finality, of surrender that isn't defeat but relief. Something in your life, an identity, a relationship, a pattern of trying too hard is over. The good news is that so is the pain that sustained it. The Ten of Swords marks not tragedy but completion. The sun rises behind the fallen figure. Endings, when accepted, become beginnings in better lighting. You've died to an old version of yourself, and there's no resurrection this time, only rebirth. Commitment, solitude, repetition, these are not glamorous words, but they are sacred ones. They form the backbone of maturity, the quiet architecture of fulfillment. In astrology, this is the Saturn lesson hidden in a Jupiter heart. Structure amplifies expansion. In psychology, it's the cognitive shift from reaction to intention. In Buddhist thought, it's the middle way, the steady path between craving and aversion. For Sagittarius, it's the moment the wanderer becomes a builder. So, as the year unfolds, take your freedom seriously enough to give it form. Commit fully to what matters and release what doesn't. Guard your solitude as training ground, not punishment. When the same symbols echo through your life, don't roll your eyes, listen. Repetition means the universe hasn't moved on until you do. And when the inevitable ending comes, greet it like an old teacher who's just handed you your diploma. Smile, bow, and step into the sunrise. Because by now, you know, the lesson was never about loss. It was about learning to mean what you choose, to walk your path with conviction, and to understand that the quiet after transformation isn't emptiness, it's peace finally taking up space. Adventure, for Sagittarius, is not a hobby or an event, it is the bloodstream of your identity. You don't go on adventures, you are one. The Three of Wands now calls you back to the wide horizon that has always been your classroom, reminding you that knowledge without movement turns into dust. The Hermit's Mountain, the place of solitude and reflection you've been climbing all year, now sits quietly behind you. It's time to descend and test what you've learned. Growth is not proven by how high you climb, but by how gracefully you return to earth carrying the light you found. Mars enters this reading like caffeine for your soul, stirring motion, curiosity, and that familiar Sagittarian restlessness that refuses to sit through life as a spectator. There is a pulse again in your story, and it beats to the rhythm of purpose, not panic. The number 22 appears as a hidden key, a master builder's code. In numerology, 22 is the architect who shapes dreams into form. You, Sagittarius, are rebuilding something you thought was gone, maybe a vision you abandoned, maybe trust in your own timing, maybe faith in your ability to begin again without apology. The message of this number is as simple as it is inconvenient: perfection is overrated, persistence is sacred. You'll try, fail, adjust, repeat, and that's what mastery looks like outside of textbooks. The world doesn't need you polished, it needs you present. You are not a sculpture to be admired, you are a process to be witnessed. In a culture obsessed with outcomes, your true rebellion is patience, the willingness to rebuild without self-hatred. Then comes the Eight of Swords, the card that exposes the most convincing illusion of all, limitation. It is the card of imagined captivity, the drama of thinking the ropes are steel when they're really thread. The restrictions around you are not real, only the habits that made them feel permanent are. You say you can't quit that job because of stability, but what you're really protecting is your comfort with misery. You say you can't love again because you've learned your lesson, but the lesson was never to stop trusting, it was to stop trusting those who can't meet you where you are. The Eight of Swords asks you to run a psychological experiment, push gently on the walls you think confine you. Most of them will turn out to be paper screens. Fear makes them look solid, curiosity makes them disappear. In behavioral terms, this is cognitive restructuring. In spiritual language, it is liberation. And here's where it gets deliciously uncomfortable. Sagittarius, you are the Zodiac's multitasker-in-chief, the philosopher with 20 browser tabs open and 5 side quests running. But even the most adventurous soul can overdose on activity. The Four of Swords interrupts you like a therapist pulling the plug on your caffeine drip. Enough. You are not lazy, you are overstimulated. Your ambition has been sprinting on a treadmill that leads nowhere. Rest is not retreat, it's resource management. The irony is that your next great breakthrough won't arrive when you're hustling, it'll appear the moment you finally stop auditioning for the universe's approval and take a nap. The psychological research agrees, recovery enhances performance. The Buddha would call it balance. Your nervous system calls it mercy. Then the Four of Wands steps in, a card about commitment and completion. It says, finish what you start. In modern culture, starting is romanticized, but finishing is enlightenment. A bridge half built doesn't take anyone home, and your energy is too sacred to keep abandoning halfway points. Completion creates confidence, and confidence is fuel for the next mission. The Tower makes its expected cameo, not to destroy but to renovate. If something collapses, it's because your structure was built on borrowed blueprints, other people's expectations, old versions of success, inherited rules that never fit your size. Let them fall. When the dust settles, you'll see how light feels when the weight of pretending is gone. The universe never ruins what's real, it only removes what's redundant. And then arrives the Empress, the final laugh of the reading, the divine reminder that abundance has better manners than you think. She doesn't chase, she attracts. She doesn't strive, she radiates. Her presence teaches you that the moment you stop trying to earn worthiness, success begins to orbit naturally. There's a sly humor in this lesson. You've spent years working harder than necessary to prove you're free, when the truest expression of freedom is ease. In psychological terms, this is flow. In spiritual terms, it's surrender. In common sense, it's knowing when to stop fixing what was never broken. By the close of 2025, Sagittarius, your adventure will no longer look like airplanes and passports. It will look like self-mastery disguised as ordinary life. You'll find thrill in simplicity, courage in stillness, and joy in the quiet moments where your old identity would have panicked. You'll realize that every detour, every false start, was not wasted time but rehearsal for wisdom. The universe doesn't want your perfection, it wants your participation. The lesson is clear. Freedom was never about movement alone, it was about presence within it. You don't need to chase the horizon anymore. You've become it. Healing, Sagittarius, is no longer a poetic suggestion you can postpone until life feels convenient. It's the assignment you can't skip, the tuition fee of adulthood that no one warned you about. The Three of Swords arrives like an honest therapist with bad timing, reminding you that unhealed pain doesn't disappear, it just changes costumes and shows up in new relationships. Love in 2025 is not a vacation from loneliness, it's a curriculum in emotional literacy. If you want real love, you'll have to heal first. And if you don't want love, that's fine too, then love yourself enough not to need it. Either way, forgiveness is non-negotiable, because resentment is just unpaid emotional rent. The heart can't receive new joy while it's still subletting space to old wounds. Then comes the Five of Pentacles, that moment of feeling exiled from warmth. Sagittarius, you measure worth by belonging more than you admit. You thrive in movement, in communities, in laughter that fills rooms. But sometimes the universe puts you outside the door, not to punish you, but to protect you from rooms that have grown too small. Rejection often means redirection. When the noise fades, you discover the quality of your own company. You're not being abandoned, you're being upgraded to solitude with better Wi-Fi and fewer distractions. In spiritual language, this is the moment when the soul stops networking and starts remembering. In psychology, it's emotional differentiation, realizing that approval is optional, authenticity isn't. So don't panic if certain people drift away. Some connections were built for earlier chapters. Let the departures edit your life into clarity. Now, about that restless energy humming beneath your ribs, yes, that's the universe handing you your next quest. Every Sagittarius, even the introverted ones, secretly wants an impossible adventure, something wild enough to make them feel alive again. The stars agree. Your so-called ridiculous goal this year is expansion, not reckless movement, but deliberate stretching of your limits. Travel, publish, teach, risk, fail, rise again. Choose curiosity over control. The Knight of Cups shows up here as your inner visionary, the romantic of possibility. He stands in the desert yet dreams of rivers, proof that optimism is a survival skill. That's you when you stop overanalyzing and start trusting the process. You're not naive, you're experimental, and the world needs more scientists of hope. But even visionaries need grounding. The Queen of Pentacles reminds you that success isn't about juggling 10 side hustles or performing exhaustion as proof of ambition. You don't need to work harder, you need to align smarter. The wealth you're meant to cultivate this year is peace, not panic. In economics they call it efficiency, in Buddhism, right livelihood. It's the art of doing what matters without bleeding energy on what doesn't. Imagine trading the noise of productivity for the music of purpose. That's prosperity in its truest form. And the Seven of Cups gives you the twist. Once you release what's dead, you'll realize how many doors were hidden behind it. You don't lack opportunity, you've just been blocking the view with outdated attachments. This brings us to the larger pattern, what I call the cosmic truth reserved for the brave, the chosen ones of the Year of Triumph 2025. You, Sagittarius, are among them. Not because you're luckier, but because you volunteered for a curriculum that costs comfort. You chose a lifetime where clarity replaces chaos, where destiny feels like pressure until it transforms into purpose. You'll lose things that once felt permanent, outgrow circles that can't expand with you, and be misunderstood by those who mistake stillness for weakness. But don't waste energy defending your evolution. You are not ahead to make others feel behind, you're simply moving at the speed of honesty. Growth has a habit of shrinking your audience before it expands your peace. The reward for your courage is freedom, the clean kind that requires fewer explanations. There's humor in this cosmic setup too. The universe loves irony. The very things you're terrified to release will come back to you improved, once you stop clinging. It's the celestial equivalent of deleting old files and discovering your computer finally runs faster. The simpler your life becomes, the more miracles fit inside it. Complexity was never a sign of depth, it was just clutter in a better costume. By the time December 2025 arrives, something fundamental will shift in you. You'll finally understand that destiny isn't an external force dragging you toward an unknown future, it's the version of you that refuses to stay small. The universe doesn't punish hesitation, it simply rearranges your life until you remember who you are. The setbacks, delays, and surprises were not random, they were rerouting. Every heartbreak was a syllabus revision. Every ending was an act of editing. So breathe. Walk forward. Let go of what feels heavy, even if it once felt holy. Don't confuse nostalgia with loyalty. The world isn't ending, it's recalibrating around your next beginning. And if at any point the road feels lonely, remember, even the arrow flies alone before it hits the target. That solitude isn't emptiness, it's aerodynamic. It's what allows you to travel straight into meaning. In practical terms, here's your homework. Start living like the main character who finally realizes the plot has been waiting for their decision. Speak your truth even if your voice shakes. Rest without guilt. Say yes only when your whole body agrees. Laugh at your mistakes, they're proof that you're alive enough to experiment. Remember that healing doesn't make you fragile, it makes you functional. And love, when it returns, will not be a rescue mission but a collaboration between two whole people who like each other enough to stay curious. So here's the conclusion, Sagittarius, enjoy your life. Truly enjoy it. This year isn't about achieving a mythical balance between chaos and calm, it's about discovering that joy itself is balance. Eat good food, travel to places that make your mind wider, and talk to strangers who remind you of forgotten parts of yourself. Celebrate small wins like sacred events, and when the universe sends you a detour, thank it for better scenery. Your story has never been about being perfect, it's about being awake. If you found insight, laughter, or a bit of courage in today's reading, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to Zodiac Talks Tarot, where we turn cosmic chaos into human wisdom and remind every sign that destiny is not fate, it's participation. Keep your eyes open, your humor intact, and your heart available for the next chapter. The stars are still writing, and so are you.